Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome. I welcome you all to this lecture in the course Sandhi in Paninian Grammar. In this lecture we continue studying At Sandhi or vowel Sandhi. We have stated that there are two classifications in At Sandhi. The first one being Ekasthanika Ekadesha, where there is one substituent and one substitute. Eka Sthani, Eka Adesha. We have already studied this classification and its two instances in detail. The two instances of this first classification are Yan Sandhi and Ayavayav Sandhi. Yan Sandhi is stated by the sutra Iko Yanachi. Ayavayav Sandhi is stated by the sutra Echo Yavayavaha. We have studied both these sutras in detail. We also applied the Uddeshya Vidheya Bhava and Anudit Savarnasya Cha Pratyayaha. We also studied the template examples of these instances. We also studied the concrete, specific examples of both these instances. These examples were found at different levels inside a pada or between two padas. We also noted while we studied this first classification that some of the examples are artificial. Now this is the second classification, Dvisthanika Ekadesha. This is what we are studying currently, Dvisthanika Ekadesha. This means two substituents and one substitute, Dvisthanika and Eka Adesha. In this Dvisthanika Ekadesha, the main part is played by the sutra which is an Adhikara sutra, Ekah Purva Parayoho, 6.184, where Ekaha means one substitute and Purva Parayoho means in place of previous and latter sound. One substitute takes place in place of two sounds, previous and latter. Diagrammatically, this can be shown in this following manner, where you have A followed by B in the close proximity in the Samhita mode, and we can say that A comes immediately before B and B comes immediately after A. So you have A plus B. Now one of the rules in this section 6.184 up to 6.1.112 applies, and then this A and B, in place of both of them, C comes as a substitute. So A plus B is the substituent, C is the substitute. A and B, these are the sthanis, C is the adesha. A plus B is the input and C is the output generated by the sutra in this particular section. There are 5 instances of this Dvisthanika Ekadesha. The first one is Guna Sandhi, stated by the Sutra Ad Gunaha 6.187, and we have studied this before. The second instance is Vriddhi Sandhi, stated by the Sutra Vriddhirechi mainly, and this is 6.188, and we are currently studying this Vriddhi Sandhi. We have already studied the Sutra Vriddhirechi. We also studied the Uddeshya Vidheya Bhava and the Sutra Anudit Savarnasya Cha Pratyayaha and its application, and then the template examples, and then the concrete specific examples. Examples at various levels within a pada, between two padas, within a compound, or between dhatu and upasarga. The third instance is Pararupa Sandhi, stated by the Sutra Engi Pararupam 6.194. The fourth instance of this Dvisthanika Ekadesha is Savarna Dirgha Sandhi, stated by the Sutra Akas Savarne Dirghaha 6.1.101. And the fifth instance of this Dvisthanika Ekadesha is Purvarupa Sandhi, stated by the Sutra Amipurvaha onwards. Amipurvaha is 6.1.107. Right now we are focused on Vriddhi Sandhi, and we have already studied Vriddhirechi, and Vriddhirechi 6.188 means in the close proximity when immediately before H, and H is A, O, I and Au. The Pratyahara H covers Sutra number 3 and 4 in the Pratyahara Sutras. So, the Sutra means once again in the close proximity when immediately before H, that is A, O, I, Au, a short and long appears, then in place of both of them comes the substitute termed Vriddhi. Vriddhi means A, I and Au. This is stated by Vriddhiradaich 111. To put it in the form of an equation, we can say that A plus H are in close proximity and 6188 applies, and the output generated is Vriddhi. We also noted that H, which is the condition for 6188 to apply, which is the environment for 6188 to apply, is part of the environment called Ach, which is the environment for 6187. This is the overlap of scope of application of these two rules, 6187 and 6188. And since 6188 has a limited scope of application, which is part of the bigger scope, 6187 does not apply in the scope of 6188, namely H. The reason being that if 6187 applies in the environment of H, 6188 would not get any scope of application, and then it becomes redundant. And this should not be the case, and that is the reason why 6187 does not apply when H is the environment. 6187 does have scope of application elsewhere, and that is the reason why 6187 does not apply in the environment of H. We also studied this sutra Engi Pararupam 6.194, which means that immediately before a verbal root that begins with Eng, Eng means A and O, defined by the sutra number 3, and immediately after a preverb that ends in short or long then in place of both of them, one substitute in the form of the latter takes place. I repeat, immediately before a verbal root that begins with ing and immediately after a preverb that ends in short or long in place of both of them, one substitute in the form of the latter, which in this case is ing, takes place. So if we have a preverb ending in over here, followed by a verbal root which begins with A or O, then 6.94 applies and the output generated is A and O in place of A plus A and O. So we have pra, which is a preverb, followed by ejate, which is a verbal form which is having the verbal root age, to tremble. It begins with A. Now in this case 6194 applies and the output generated is pr, A and jate. So this A replaces both A as well as A. So we get the form pre jate. Now if we look at this, here we have A followed by A, which is the scope of application of 6188. But 6194 restricts this domain further and says that you don't want any A over here, you don't want any A or O over here. This A should be a part of a preverb, that is an upasarga, and this A or O should be a part of the dhatu or the verbal root. Only then this rule will apply, and in this case then 6188 does not apply. So the scope of application of 6194 is upasarga plus dhatu. Upasarga should end in A and dhatu should begin with A, and then 6194 applies. This cancels 6188. Why we are studying this right now is because now the other sutras stating the vriddhi substitute we shall study, and these sutras they further restrict the domain of engi pararupam and reinforce the vriddhi substitution. And the sutra is ete dhatyut su, 6189. This sutra has got only one pada, ete dhatyut su. This is 7/3 of ete dhatyut. This has got three components: eti, which is the verbal form of the verbal root e, to go; edhati, which is the mention of the verbal root edha, and this is the stylistic expression within the Ashtadhyayi. Any verbal root is mentioned in this particular fashion, eti as well as edhati. And then finally ut. So ete dhatyutsu means immediately before eti, edhati and ut. The words continued are ad from 6187, ad gunaha, echi 7/1 of h. H is a, o, I and au. So echi means immediately before h. Vriddhi is 1/1 of vriddhi. Vriddhi means a, I and au, and of course ekah purva parayoho, which means one substitute in place of two, the earlier and latter substituents. So the meaning of this sutra, ete dhatyut su, is the following. In the close proximity, that is in the samhita mode, when immediately after a, short or long, appear 1. the verbal root e to go and the verbal root edha to increase, and most importantly both beginning with h, and finally ut. Then in place of both of them one vriddhi substitute takes place. I repeat, in the close proximity samhita mode, when immediately after a, short or long, at, appear 1. the verbal root e meaning to go, the verbal root edha meaning to increase, and most importantly they both begin with h, and third ut. Then in place of both of them one vriddhi substitute takes place. To show this in the form of an equation, we can say that if there is this word at the end of which comes short followed by eti or edhate, which begin with a. Then the substitute would be the elements in the previous word and I in place of a and a, and ti or dhate. So the form that we will get is iti or aidhate. Similarly, if you have a word ending in a followed by oot, and this oot will occur in a limited, very limited domain, and how we shall see soon, but this is how it will work. So a plus oot, ha plus us, and in place of a and u, we will have vruddhi substitute, namely au, and au ha us, and the output generated will be auhas, auhaha. Here are the examples. So we have pra as the preverb followed by eti, and so then 6189 applies, and the output generated is pra iti, praiti. Similarly, pra plus edhate, and we have pra ending in a, edhate beginning with a, and 6189 applies, and the output generated is pra plus I plus dhate, praidhate. Since eti and edhate, they both begin with a, 6189 has applied. And finally, when we go to this example where we have a compound Vishwa plus oot, ha plus us, this is the accusative dual, accusative plural suffix, dvitiya bahuvachana, and the compounded word is Vishwavaha, and we have the sutra Vaha Ut 64132 applying and converting this va of Vaha into Ut, and so we have Vishwa plus Ut, ha, us, and so this a and u, the output is generated by the sutra 6189, namely Vishwa au ha us, Vishwauhas, Vishwauhaha. Ut is a specially stated substitute in a restricted environment of vowel beginning suffixes from 2/3 onwards, after a nominal root and in place of va, which is part of the verbal root vaha, and which becomes vaha over here. And the sutra stating this is Vaha Ut 64132. So let us study this sutra Vaha Ut in little detail. Vaha Ut has got two words in it, two padas, Vahaha, which is 6-1 of Vaha, and Ut, which is 1-1 of Ut. The words continued are Bhasya 6/1 of Bha, and in this case, sixth case means part of, because Vahaha already has conveyed the meaning of in place of Vaha. Samprasaranam is 1-1 of Samprasarana. So now the meaning of Vaha Ut is the Samprasarana substitute that takes place of Va in Vaha, which is part of Abha. To repeat, Ut is the Samprasarana substitute that takes place of Va in Vaha, which is part of Abha. And here is the derivation. So, Vishwam Vahati, somebody who carries the world, that is the meaning one wants to convey. So, Vishwam Vahati, and you have Vishwa Vaha Nvi by the Sutra Vahascha 3-64, we add the suffix Nvi which changes Vaha to Vaha. We have Supodhatu Pratipadikayoho, so gets deleted, and we have this stage Vishwa plus Vaha, after which we add the accusative plural suffix as. So Vishwa plus Vaha as a compound and the suffix as. Now comes 64132 to apply. This as suffix causes this entire compound to be called bha. Now this Vaha is part of bha, and therefore va, which comes at the beginning of this Vaha, is substituted by oot by 64132. So we have now Vishwa plus oot, tha is a marker by the sutra halantyam, and so it gets deleted, and that's why it is mentioned in the parenthesis. The actual substitution is u. So this u and aha is the remaining part of vaha. Only va consonant gets this u substitute, and so you have u aha plus as. Then this u and this a, they have the purva rupa sandhi taking place because of 61108, and so you have Vishwa plus uha plus as. Now at this stage we have 6189 ityadhatyutsu applying, and here you have a followed by oot, u, and in place of both of them you have the vriddhi substitute, namely au. So you have Vishwa au ha as, and you get the form Vishwa has, Vishwa haha. We shall take a closer look at this Purva Rupa Sandhi when we study Purva Rupa Sandhi in detail later on. Right now our focus is Vriddhi Sandhi, and so in this derivation where you have a followed by u, 6189 applies, and in place of both of them you get the substitute au, and so we have the form Vishvauhaha derived. This is how ityadhatyutsu works. Now if we look at the interrelation of rules, we can say that for 6188 we need a plus h as an environment, as an input, and vriddhi is the output that is generated. For 6194 we need a plus h, yes, but we need a at the end of an upasarga and h at the beginning of a dhatu, and so the output generated will be pararoop. Now if we look at 6189, we need a, but a as part of the upasarga followed by h, yes, and that too also of a dhatu, yes, but only of two dhatus, e and edha, and the output generated would be vriddhi and not pararupa. And so we can say that 6189 reinforces 6188, the vriddhi sandhi, by cancelling 6194, because 6194 is the further restricted domain of 6194. This is very important. After having studied these two important sutras about the vriddhi sandhi, namely vriddhirechi and ityadhatyutsu, let us study some more vartika statements which complete the description of the vriddhi sandhi. The first vartika is akshat uhinyam upasankhyanam, which says that when the word aksha in the compound comes immediately before the word uhini, then in place of this a and u, you have the vriddhi substitute. And once again, the selection of the substitute will be based on the place of articulation. A has got kantha as place of articulation, u's place of articulation is oshtha, and au amongst the three vriddhis, au has got kanthoshtha as the place of articulation. So au is chosen as the substitute, and we have aksha, au and hini. So akshauhini as the word, with the vriddhi sandhi taking place. Actually, when a is followed by u we have 6187 which applies and generates the output in the form of A, but not in the case of this specific word akshauhini. Here a plus u and the output generated is au, namely the vriddhi. The next vartika is prat uhodho dhye shaishyeshu. Prat uhodho dhye shaishyeshu. Here there are two words, prat and the second word uhodho dhye shaishyeshu. Uhodho dhye shaishyeshu is the 7-1 of uhodho dhye shaishya. Prat is 5-1 of pra. So we have pra immediately followed by uha or udha or udhi or esha or eshya, these 5 words. And in place of a plus u, we have the vriddhi substitute. We have pra plus a plus a, and we have the vriddhi substitute. So when we have pra plus uha, the output generated is pra auha prauha. Similarly, pra plus udha and the output generated is pra audha praudha. Pra plus udhi and the output generated is pra audhi praudhi. Pra plus esha and the output generated is pra aisha praisha. And finally, pra plus eshya and the output generated is pra aishya praishya. These are the words that are generated following this particular vartika statement. If you look at all the cases, you will notice that there are these 3 cases where you have a plus u, and generally 6187 would apply over here and the output generated would be A. But that is not the case in these 3 specific words. Similarly, if you look at the remaining 2 cases, pra plus esha and eshya, because they are derived from a verbal root and a coming at the beginning of a verbal root, and so 6194 would apply and would generate the output of a plus a as A. But that is not the case with these 2 specific cases. So in these 5 cases, 6187 and 6194 do not apply, they are cancelled, and 6189 applies, and vriddhi is the substitute that is stated by this particular statement, vartika statement, prat uhodhodhe shaishyeshu. The next statement is rite cha tritiya samase. Rite is 7/1 of rita, meaning immediately before rita, and tritiya samase is 7/1 of tritiya samasa in the compound with instrumental case. The meaning of this statement is, in a compound with instrumental case, when a word ending in short a appears before the word rita, then in place of both of them, the one vriddhi substitute takes place. So a and ru, and we have one substitute, namely r. So you have a samasa, sukhena ritaha. This is the statement, this is the sentence, and these 2 words are connected together, and so we have the alaukika vigraha in the form of sukha plus ta plus rita plus su by 2132, and then we have supodhatu pratipadikayoho 2471 applying. So we have sukha plus rita, and now you have this a coming at the end of this pada, followed by ru coming at the beginning of rita, and now this particular statement applies, and in place of this a and ru, r, that is the vriddhi substitute, takes place. And we have sukh, r and ta, and that is sukharta. How this a and ru gets r as the substitute, we have already studied when we studied the sutra Urandraparaha. So this ra is added when an is the substitute in place of ru. This is an, and so therefore ra is added by the sutra Urandraparaha, and so we get the form Sukharta. In this case, a plus ru, the sutra Adgunaha 6187 would apply and the output generated would be ar. But not in this specific case, Sukharta, or any such case where Rita is the second member of the Tritiya Tatpurusha Samasa. So this is an exception to 6187, and so it had to be stated by this particular Vartika statement. Next we have a statement Pravatsatara Kambala Vasana Dasharananam Rane. Rane is in 7-1, meaning immediately before Rana, and all these words Pravatsatara Kambala Vasana and Dasharana and Dasha and Rana, of all these words and ru of Rana, they both are substituted by one r, and the output generated is the following. We have pra followed by Rana, and the output generated is pra arna prarna. Vatsatara plus Rana, a coming at the end of this pada, ru coming at the beginning of the word Rana, and so the output generated is Vatsatar arna Vatsatararna. Similarly, Kambala plus Rana, and the output generated by this statement is Kambal arna Kambalarna. Vasana plus Rana, and the output generated is Vasan arna Vasanarna. Then we have Rana plus Rana, and the output generated is Ran arna Ranarna. And finally, Dasha plus Rana, and we have the output Dash arna Dasharana. All these examples, they are exceptions to 6187, which would otherwise generate ar as the substitute. But this statement specifically takes care of these examples in which Vriddhi substitute has taken place. To summarize, in this lecture, we studied in detail the other rules related to the Vriddhi Sandhi, and we did an exhaustive treatment of all the rules. We also studied remaining part of the examples in details at different levels, within a pada or in between two padas. We also studied the interrelation of 6187, 88 and 94. We also observed that 6189 has got further smaller domain of application within that of 6194. So 6189 reinforces 6188. After having studied the Vriddhi Sandhi now, we go to the next instance of Dvisthanika Ekadesha, namely the Pararupa Sandhi stated by the Sutra 6194 in the coming lecture. Thank you for your patience.